Dear students, in this series of lectures, we are going to deal with Dr. Ambedkar's great contributions, his methodologies and the new concepts. As an untouchable, he had to bear the onslaught of the upper caste, face worst humiliation from his classmates and digest them with all humility, pain, anguish, bitterness, sufferings, torture, humiliation, all these became a painful part of his life. As the untouchable were socially ostracized and segregated, they had developed a strong hatred towards the caste system, and Ambedkar as an untouchable was not an exception on it. He made it a mission in his life to abolish the caste system and gave a new image to the Hinduism, or if necessary, give it up and embrace a new religion. This he did when he, along with his followers and friends, embraced Buddhism and became the Buddhist. Generally, Ambedkar is known as the father of Indian Constitution. Dr. K.V. Rao has described him as the mother of the Constitution, as he gave constitutional shape to the ideas of Congress rather than his own. He held the portfolio of law in Jawaharlal Nehru's first cabinet. Because of his differences with the Congress and the Prime Minister Nehru, he resigned from the Union government. Ambedkar is generally regarded as the great protagonist of the reservation of the seats in the legislature and post in the government. But towards the end of his life, when he embraced Buddhism with his followers, he advised the scheduled caste to stand on their own legs instead of depending on the crutches. Ambedkar is a rare personality in the national life of India. He was an economist, a jurist, a social revolutionary, a constitution maker, an able administrator, and above all, the constructive statesman of the extraordinary caliber. He had entered public life as a well-equipped soldier with PhD from the Columbia University, DSc from the London School of Economics, and Bharat Law from Gray's Inn. Born as a social leper, as the untouchables were being treated in those days, Ambedkar could rise to the stature of a towering personality in the national politics through perseverance as well as a profound sense of self-respect and human justice. The works of Ambedkar. Ambedkar rightly regarded his educational attainments as valuable, and even a cursory reading of his work reveal the depth of range of his erudition. He was a bibliophile and voracious reader. He also felt that the modern knowledge to which he had assiduously dedicated himself gave him an access to understanding which was superior to traditional forms of knowledge. There are some central assumptions in his approach to knowledge and understanding, particularly his belief that modernity as an advance over previous epochs, in that opened the possibility of human emancipation. The modern approach may have its fault, but had much of value to and its own inbuilt corrective measures. He brought that conceptions such as Kali Yuga, the present being unpropitious, the degenerate, the deplorable Brahminical devices of self-serving nature. The modern establishes the setting for triumph of reason, emancipating it from magic and rigid religious worldview. He often suggested a three-stage historiography to correspond to them. The triumph of reason led to the assertion of the human person and his unique value. Reason is the attribute of the human being manifested in understanding, evaluation, concentrated in science and technology, in the rise of modern institution and in man's interaction with nature. The modern also frees man from being merely a social role and assess his autonomy as a human person. However, reason can be vitiated and made prey to prejudices and parochial interests. Distortions in the understanding of the physical world could be rectified by the methods of reason itself, acting on social reality, inquiries as a different anchor that of morality of ethics. Morality is not a set of fixed canons, but it is open to rational inquiry, and moral dilemmas are subject to rational security and evolutions. The foundations of morality lie in justice, and justice in turn involves upholding the liberty and equality of the human person and extending to him the bond of the community. The person is a bearer of the body of rights, that is, claims socially warranted. Claim to culture, community are tenable only to the extent to which they embody these rights. Initially, Ambedkar saw these features as characteristics of modern world, but later attributed them to Buddhism. The technological march in history referred to in his earlier writings is absent in his later writings, where the human condition within the ethical realm is seen in stronger ontological terms. Ambedkar acknowledged the power of religion and upheld its need, but there is no place in this religion for God and the transcendent. He subscribed to the secular religion, moving away from established religion generated towards the sacred vis-a-vis the profane. His writings reveal a deep sensitivity to religion much before his enhancement with Buddhism. He felt that since human beings are part of this world, the primary role of religion is to safeguard the moral domain. Religion deploys sentiments, feelings, and culture to secure the moral domain and make it universal. Although he acknowledged the religion may make other claims, he saw these characteristics as appropriate to any religion. Ambedkar rarely reflected on the first premises of this assumption, nor did he establish the necessary linkages between them. But these assumptions were constantly at play in his assessment and evolutions. Dr. Ambedkar had knowledge of around 9 languages like Hindi, Pali, Sanskrit, English, French, German, Marathi, Persian, and Gujarati. Dr. Ambedkar's books are currently counted among the most selling books in India. Here is the list of some famous books written by Dr. Ambedkar. Caste in India, their mechanism, genesis and development. Muknoik, the problem of rupee, the origin and its solutions. Bashikrut Bharat, Janata, the annihilation of caste, the federation versus freedom, thought on Pakistan, Ranade, Gandhi, Jinnah, Mr. Gandhi and emancipation of untouchables, what Congress and Gandhi have done to the untouchables, the state and minorities, who were Sudras, Maharashtra as a linguistic province, the untouchables, the Buddha or Karl Marx, the Buddha and his Dhamma, riddles in Hinduism, Manu and Shudras, Pakistan or Partition of India, autobiographical. The intended autobiography of Ambedkar did not see the light of the day, as was the case with several of his other ambitious publishing plans. However, there are many passages in his works where he speaks directly about himself. In fact, if we exclude his 2 doctoral dissertations and essays associated with their themes, his life and writings are intimately associated. Besides, scattered in his are a few autobiographical reminiscences. He talked about his experience of untouchability, his 3 gurus Buddha, Kabir and Phule, his iconoclasm and his devotion and wishes. He had no qualms on stating his religion positions in public. He had no hesitation in calling a spade, be it Madan Mohan Malaviya or Rajagopalachari or Gandhi, if he considered as assessment as correct. At the same time, he did not want to engage in any acrimony, even though many experiences in his life, particularly in the Constituent Assembly and the legislatures, justifiably deserved stronger retaliations. The exploration of concepts. Ambedkar found the need of reflect upon the wide range of concepts, either to substantially explore them, decipher their different determinations, or to chisel and fine tune them by removing the dross. He adopted different approaches to present them, sometimes in the light of historical developments and other times in view of contentions. There are times when he attempted to explorate them from the mass of data. Occasionally, he appropriated a concept from a scholar and suggested certain innovations, or drew on his or her authority to reinforce certain dimensions of a concept at hand. There are certain concepts that he radically overhauls, such as for instance the concept of karma. Sometimes the determinations of a concept are brought out by contrasting it with kindred concepts, such as between religion, Dhamma and Sadhamma. Dealing with the different types of concepts, he is much more at home with the concepts that are less abstruse and closer to experience, tending themselves to actual practice and illustration by examples. OK. Surveyor, the first lady student of Saidanam College of Commerce and Economics, Bombay, where Ambedkar taught from 1918 to 1920, recalls him saying repeatedly, "An ounce of illustration is worth more than a pound of theory." With his focus on concepts and arguments, Ambedkar contributed to building not merely a framework for social sciences in India, but also the basis of the healthy public debate. Methodology. For Ambedkar, a study dealt with categories and concepts, their formulations, change, displacement and reformulation. The central thrust of any research agenda is the relationship across concepts or a body of concepts. There are different methods of study depending on the nature of the concepts in question. On provincial finance is the introduction to the evolution of provincial finance in British India, published in 1925. This study is a revised version of Ambedkar's PhD thesis at Columbia University, submitted in 1917. The Untouchables, the preface to the book, The Untouchables, Who Were They and They Become Untouchables, published in 1947. It was a sequel to his book entitled Who Were the Sudras, How They Came to Be the Fourth Varna in the Indo-Aryan Society. However, the methods that he employed for those studies were very different. While the second study employed exegesis, the former, the set up its hypothesis based on studies engaged with similar phenomena under study, and argued that since it succeeds in explaining all the known data, it plausibly could be accepted. Ambedkar undertook different types of studies, some involving the collections of sizable data and its proceedings, such as the election studies of 1937 and 1945, focusing on the constituencies reserved for the scheduled castes. He undertook several caste studies, often to drive home a point better. There are studies where he attempted to locate the major changes in policy or issues over the period by dividing the period into appropriate stages. These projects required resorts to documents and archives for necessary data, such as both doctoral studies of Ambedkar, which drew merely from official documents, but also from archival data. In them, there are the standard references to the manuscripts and text. There are studies such as Who Were the Sudras, exegetical in nature, which took into text but purpose an alternative thesis, because the existing explanations of these texts do not account for certain knowledge details or passages. Studies such as the Untouchables resort to the method for constructing a distinctive thesis content centered on a characteristic feature in a determinate group existing solely in that group and universally shared by it. Ambedkar also dwelt a great deal on interpretation and on the criteria appropriate for it. He argued with Gandhi that Gandhi's interpretation of Hinduism did not stand up to the criteria of interpretation. Further, he felt that interpretations which do not take popularity, held beliefs and strong evaluations into account do not materially affect the situations studied. For all the major works involving a thesis to be advanced, an issue to be explored, or a position to be combated, Ambedkar spells out his methodological route, particularly the evaluation of provincial finance in British India, the problems of rupees and the untouchables. Ideological. The ideas and ideals of John Dewey, Edwin Arie, Seligman, the Fabians and the British idealists had a deep impact on Ambedkar. He described himself as a progressive radical and occasionally as a progressive conservative, the qualification progressive being generally present, distinguishing himself from the liberals and the communists depending on the case. He saw the directive principles of state policy of the Indian Constitution as upholding economic democracy. His notion of liberty was avowedly that the T.H. Green kind. Although he talked of equality before the law and considered it as a major contribution of the British rule in India, He was not satisfied with this notion and advanced a stronger notion such as equality of consideration, equality of respect, and equality of dignity. He was sensitive to the notion of respect, and the notion of community was central in his consideration. The demand for fraternity in the French Revolution was seen by him as a call for community. The Buddha, he argued, strove for building communities while Brahmanism attempted to fragment them. At the same time, Ambedkar recognized the critical role of the state, the legacies of Columbia University, London School of Economics, and the colonial state in India being consonance with such recognition. He defended a developmental and ameliorative and consequently an interventionist approach as against the Gandhians and liberals. The state was invested with the pivotal role in the economy, but wherever such a pivotal role for the state is alluded to, it is based on the promises of the regime of rights that suggested the reasons and limitations of intervention. He was deeply suspicious of embedded identities asserting themselves in the name of ethnic, relating such assertions to the problems of majorities and minorities. When identity assertions took place, he felt the minorities are likely to be the victims. He qualified majoritarianism with the strong grids of the rule of law, special privileges to minorities, and the existence of the civil society which could nurture democracy as a civic virtue. His opinion that policies and institutions deeply affect the questions and representation found expression in his suggestion before the Simon Commission that if adult franchise was introduced, he would favor a joint electorate with a reservation for depressed classes, and if limited franchise was continued, he would demand a separate electorate. One of Ambedkar's most important argument against Hinduism was that the caste and untouchability did not let Hindus act as a community. There is the emphasis on moral order, for which he sometimes kept company with Edmund Burke. Further, there is a privileging of human agency along with the freedom and education, for which he falls upon John Dewey. He rarely gave reductive picture of religions, but went into the sociological moorings that threw up a diversity of beliefs and practices. At the same time, he admitted that commonly held religious beliefs had an impact on socially differentiated constituencies. He found a lot of doctrinal cleavages within Hinduism. He had no great fascination for bhakti, with which he was nourished in his childhood, castigating the bhakti saints for falling to attack the Shastras, which provided the normative and sacred grids for sustaining and justifying unjust social institutions. He was quite contemptuous in dwelling Labour Party in India, although while the British for a while. He had maintained some contracts with the left wing of liberals such as Edwin Montague, the Secretary for India during 1917-1920. In 1945, when Ambedkar was asked to join Liberal Party in India, he squarely refused. He expected the Labour government in England, which came to power after the war, would extend favourable treatment to him. He explained the disadvantageous position of the constituency that he represented and pleaded for special consideration. However, he was patronizingly asked by the members of the cabinet mission belonging to the Labour Party why he did not make common cause with the left instead of seeking separate consideration for the scheduled castes. He often felt that the Conservative Party understood the fact of historically inherited identities and social cleavages better than the Labour Party. Ambedkar watched Gandhi and Gandhian intervention in the national movement very closely and maintained a meticulous account. His three major works, Mr. Gandhi and the Emancipation of the Untouchables, Ranade, Gandhi and Jinnah, and what Congress and Gandhi have done to the untouchables, bear witness to it. Ambedkar initially believed that Gandhian intervention would push forward the social reforms agenda, and such social transformation would direct the political reforms to come. Seeing his own attempt at reforms in 1920s as depending and widening the initiative that Gandhi had taken. Although Ambedkar was emphatic on emancipation of untouchables on their own impetus, there were no serious differences on the issues they identified for popular mobilization. Ambedkar felt a rude shock when, in his assessment, Gandhi succumbed to the pressures of orthodoxy and instead of social transformation became the agent of orthodoxy. Gandhi's strategy for the abolition of untouchability, he felt, placed the untouchables at the behest of caste Hindus. The suspicion became intensified during the Round Table Conference when Ambedkar felt that Gandhi was attempting to placate the Muslims while isolating the untouchables. There was a thaw in their relations after the Pune Pact when Ambedkar agreed to become a member of the executive committee of the Anti-Touchability League, later to be named as the Harijan Sevak Sangh. But soon Ambedkar resigned from this body as he did not accept the understanding and strategy of the league nor the kind of activity it prioritized. After 1933, Ambedkar fought a relentless battle against Gandhi, although they continued to share a number of concerns in common. Ambedkar showed an extraordinary interest in Marxism practically in 1950s. All his major writings during this period, Buddha and the Future of His Religion, the Buddha and his Dhamma, and Buddha and Karl Marx refer to Marx as central figure. Besides, in the 1950s, Ambedkar started working on a book entitled India and Communism, which however did not progress much. He identified certain crucial areas on which he agreed with Karl Marx. The task of philosophy is to transform the world. There is conflict between class and class, private ownership of property begets sorrow and exploitation, and the good society requires that private property be collectivized. He found that on all these four issues, Buddha is the agreement with Marx. He, however, rejected the inevitability of socialism, the economic interpretation of history, the thesis on the popularization of the proletariat, dictatorship of the proletariat, withering away of the state, and the strategy of violence as a means to seize power. He felt that Buddhism, which called for the self-control and moral foundation for society, could provide the missing dimensions for a socialist project and for the purpose called for the dialogue between Marxism and Buddhism. Therefore, while liberal and modernist alliances of Buddhism were taking place elsewhere, Ambedkar wanted to relocate Buddhism in the trajectory of Marxism and vice versa. Summary. Dear students, in this lesson, we have discussed the major contributions of Dr. Ambedkar, which are available by the Education Department, Government of Maharashtra, Mumbai, published the collection of Ambedkar's writings and speeches in the different volumes. Apart from the Government of Maharashtra, the Ministry of Social Justice also publishes books written by Dr. Ambedkar. Further, in this lesson, we have discussed the methodology which was adopted by Ambedkar. We have also briefly discussed on the autobiography of Ambedkar. His explanation of concept with the eminent ideologists is another important phenomena that we have discussed. Dear students, in the next lecture, we can see the important socio-political concepts of B.R. Ambedkar. Thank you.